D.C. We are a national philanthropy that supports community organizing that is pushing for school discipline reform and healthy, safe, and equitable learning environments in the United States. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Leah Austin, who is Vice President of Programs at the Southern Education Foundation in Atlanta, Georgia. And we're very excited to share with you information about the first ever Education Anew Fellowship. Next slide. So here's our agenda for our time together today. We're going to talk first about who the Communities for Just Schools Fund is, what we are, and what we do. We'll do the same for the Southern Education Foundation. And then we'll talk about what the fellowship is, what our goals are for the fellow, what the work of the fellow, the day-to-day work of the fellow will look like. We'll talk through the application, the requirements of the application, and then we'll have some time for question and answer. So during that time, the question and answer time, we will open the line so that you all can ask your questions and we can hear you. But there is, of course, the chat box there in your webinar toolbox there. And you can, at any point, feel free to put questions and comments in that box that we will respond to. And then we'll talk through the timeline for the application process, the fellowship application process, and then we will close. Next slide. So just to share with you a bit about the Communities for Just Schools Fund. We are a donor collaborative, which means that we have several foundations, at this point 14 foundations, that are members of the fund, and we re-grant their dollars to community organizers all over the country that are pushing for school discipline reform, for elimination of the school-to-prison pipeline, and for creation of healthy, equitable, and safe learning environments. And this gives you a sense of where our grantees are all over the country. And if you go to the next slide, so the former slide showed you where the list of our original partners. And as of the end of last year, 2016, we grew from 28 grantees to now 50 grantee partners all over the country in 19 different states and Washington, D.C. And I share this with you because this is our network, and this is who we are expecting our fellow will be working with. And so this gives you a sense of how spread out our organizations are and the various places all over the country that they have been working. Next slide. So our role as the Communities for Just Schools Fund is to support our grantees in influencing federal decision-making related to school discipline reform and creation of healthy school climates. So the organizing work that our partners have been doing for many, many years, really since the late 90s, early 2000s, has resulted in what the federal government has done to create the Supportive School Discipline Initiative, for example, to launch new investigations around school discipline reform in places like Pinellas County, Florida, and Meridian, Mississippi, and has created new grant-making structures out of the federal government in the previous administration. And the extensive work that we saw coming out of both the Department of Justice and Department of Education really came about because of the work of organizers, the leadership of organizers. We also work to support our grantee partners to change state and local policies and practices so that they're focused at the school level on codes of conduct and policies that are disproportionately impacting, especially on young people of color in schools, that are requiring suspension for things like talking back to a teacher, for instance, or wearing the wrong school uniform, and thus then excluding young people from educational opportunity and from opportunity for educational success. And they're also focused not just at the school level, but they're focused at the school board level for school district-wide policies and codes of conduct. And then at the local level, city level, and state level as well. So their organizing work has changed state legislation related to school discipline and removal of, for example, willful defiance as a category of offense in Los Angeles, and the elimination of the possibility of suspending and expelling children as young as kindergarten through 2nd grade in Chicago, for example, in the state law. And then finally, the work that they're doing is really correcting the nation's very broken perception of children of color and communities of color. And so we're supporting that work as well. The Communities for Just Schools Fund sits at a very kind of sweet spot of intersectionality between our grantees and between the funders that we work with and that we engage with on a regular basis. And so we also engage with donors to help them understand the field of school discipline reform and creation of healthy school climate, to really kind of direct their resources to that field, and then to work together with each other for greatest collective impact. Next slide. So I will now turn it to my friend Leah Austin from the Southern Education Foundation to talk a bit about the work of SEF.
Thank you, Allison. And let me just quickly say how excited we are here at SEF to be a part of this great initiative and to act as a host site. We are extremely excited about having someone come on board with us. So my role right now for the next few minutes is to provide some information, kind of an overview of who the Southern Education Foundation, who we are. So we were founded in 1867, so we are about 150 years old, actually have an anniversary this year. We were founded as the George Peabody Education Fund. Interesting fact is that the purpose of this fund was in fact to create a public school system for free blacks in the South, and so we have stayed very close to that mission of advancing equity and excellence in education for all students in the South, with a particular focus on low-income students and students of color. I would best describe us as a combination of a think tank and an action tank, using collaboration, advocacy, and research really to improve outcomes for the very youngest children on through the continuum as they grow into adults. Next slide. So about our work, some of our key focus areas are, one, promoting early learning. And so work that we've done here has really been around research that follows the investments in the South. And when I say South, we kind of have a flexible region, but focus heavily on the traditional 15 states that make up the South. So in our early learning work, what we have primarily done is really try to keep an eye on trends around investments or lack of investment that states in the South are making in support of early learning opportunities for children. Another focus area for us is what we call advancing public education, which is a focus on the quality of K-12 school systems. And so we've done everything from research and data analysis on various equity factors or inequities in school systems and schools across the state, to also being kind of a backbone support to a coalition here in Georgia that was really trying to get to organize and get civic engagement around a ballot initiative that the governor had posed in the previous election around state takeovers. And then lastly, in terms of focus areas, improving college access and completion is our higher ed body of work. Another focus area where we have done extensive research, have also provided technical assistance to HBCUs and minority serving institutions in a number of different ways. So across these focus areas, The core strategies that we deploy as an organization are, one, leveraging knowledge of the field. And what this really means is convening folks and operating and establishing learning communities so that we are organizing knowledge and trying to advance new solutions or even refine existing solutions. Putting good ideas to a fair test. So here we're really talking about, what are the promising sort of pilots and demonstration projects that we might want to support, that we might want to promote and conduct. And so an example would be that we just finished up this past summer a 3-year demonstration project working with minority-serving institutions across the South to improve their practices specifically around developmental education. It was a DevEd reform effort that we supported. Mobilizing the public. So this is really thinking about how we as an organization can, directly engage the folks that need the most engagement, right? That are really the folks that the issues that we care most about impact. And so this is really around not only the education of providing research and data and information in that way, but also the very activity of being able to organize and support leaders on the ground. Communications as a change strategy. As we're all aware, folks are getting their information in various different ways now. And so we as an organization are really thinking about and advancing not only what we've historically done, which has been to conduct and commission, in many ways, very traditional academic research, but also thinking in a much more, I think, sophisticated way around what's the social media, what are the other tactics that we need to use to really think about communications as not just a way of telling a story or talking, but really as a strategy for education reform. And then lastly, leadership development. So, when we talk about being a think and action tank, a lot of this leadership development piece has to do with, well, once you put the information out for people, people need to be able to have the capacity to take that information and do something with it. And so for us, this is really around developing change agents that can focus on equity in the South. And so we have done that and are doing this through a couple of things. We have a doctoral internship here at SCF that provides minority doctoral students with the opportunity to do research and analysis. We have commissioned a Fellows for Innovation and Change group of thought leaders in higher ed that are really trying to think about reform and innovations in the higher ed space, primarily thought leaders of color, to give them a real opportunity to get their research interest out into the field. And then 2 other programs are CELI and the Racial Equity Leadership Network, which I will pause because I'll go a little bit deeper into those in another set of slides when we talk more specifically about the work that the fellow will do here at SCF.
Fantastic. Thank you, Leah.
Absolutely.
So the Education Anew Fellowship Program is the very first such fellowship, and we are very excited to be partnered with the Southern Education Foundation in launching this program. So the fellow will work in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Southern Education Foundation's offices, and will be working very closely with the CELI and Racial Equity Leadership Network fellowship programs that Leah just mentioned, and will describe a bit more in detail in a bit. And the fellow will be a part of the Communities for Just Schools Fund grantee partner organizing network, and will really hopefully come from impacted community, and will him or herself be a community organizer and have experience as an organizer, and will be able to really connect the world of educator and organizer so that we are informing one another in the work that we're doing, that philanthropy as a stakeholder is informed, just as young people and parents and families are informed, and informing the work that educators are doing, and that there's a healthy cycle of information. So you see here several different roles that we are expecting the fellow to play, and the first is probably the most critical, and that is to really build a best practices institute for educators, organizers, funders, researchers, government actors, and others. And that Best Practices Institute will be a collection of information, of toolkits, of videos, and other things that provide educators especially, but also organizers and advocates with a sense of what is available as we think about, the push to keep young people in school. What should educators be doing in school to make sure that young people are engaged, to make sure that young people are celebrated and appreciated for who they are and who they bring with them, who kind of walks in the space with them, their parents and families, their elders and their peers, and that the environment is a healthy environment, that it is not only not toxic, but is actually affirmatively healthy for young people, and particularly for young people of color, so that we're really leading from a space of equity, and that schools are very familiar with the tenets of equity and what it takes to deliver equitable instruction and create healthy learning environments for young people. So the fellow will be designing that Best Practices Institute and will work with us to really launch and manage that institute. It will be an online repository of information. It will be informed by the Racial Equity Leadership Network that the Southern Education Foundation is supporting, which is a fellowship of superintendents, so district leadership educators, who also will be informed in their learning process by the organizer, who is the Education Anew Fellow. And it will be a community-driven, community-centered place where we can deliver much-needed advice and guidance and resources for educators and others in how to create healthy and equitable learning environments. The second piece is to really build the capacity of organizers in the Communities for Just Schools Fund partner network. So working directly with our organizing partners to identify their needs, some of the gaps in the field, and then assist in the building and facilitation of partner learning circles, all of which will go into informing the Best Practices Institute. So learning circles around things like alternatives to exclusionary discipline, cultural competence and culturally relevant programming, counseling, and divest, invest, or justice reinvestment strategies, building Black-Brown solidarity, and things like that. The third piece of the work for the fellow will be to help to embed organizing as a strategy of the Southern Education Foundation. And as Leah described, the Southern Education Foundation really has a role in working directly with educators and ensuring that educators have the tools that they need at their disposal in order to be effective leaders of the classroom and schools and school districts. And the organizing is really not only a viable tool for systems change, but organizers are themselves leaders of such systems change. And so the fellow, in just their presence at, being embedded with the Southern Education Foundation, but also their work with the two programs that Leah will describe in a bit, will also help to make sure that organizing as a strategy is really embedded in the work of the Southern Education Foundation. And then finally, to really work with us, the Communities for Just Schools Fund, to connect the Best Practices Institute to other work that the Communities for Just Schools Fund is doing. So, for example, our Education Anew initiative is our developing strategy, and that strategy includes things like maintaining a global focus on the work for racial equity in schools, ensuring a significant communication support system for our grantee partners, and really ensuring also leadership development opportunities for youth organizers who are focused on this work. So the fellow will be helping us to really make sure that we are making the connections between the other parts of the work of the Communities for Just Schools Fund and the Best Practices Institute. Next slide. So Leah will talk a bit about the work specifically at the Southern Education Foundation that the fellow will be asked to do.
Thank you. And I will just, because Allison did an awesome job sort of lifting up specifically the work that we want to do around embedding organizing as a strategy of SEF, but I'll just say that this is an important overall goal for the organization. We are going to be launching actually a strategic planning process where we're really thinking about what's our next generation of work, and organizing as a strategy and as the sort of transformation of power as a principle for the organization is something that we feel strongly needs to be a part of the work that we do. And so we're really excited to be able to leverage the expertise of this fellow to help us to be, quite frankly, smarter and better at community organizing at that kind of work. Specifically, the two leadership initiatives that we have identified here and want some support from the fellow in improving upon are, one, the SELI program, which is the Southern Education Leadership Initiative. This program or this initiative provides training and summer fellowships to a diverse group of college and graduate level students. And so these students they come to SEF for 2 weeks during the summer. 1 week they come for an orientation, and the last week they come for the actual closeout of the program, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. But then they are deployed across the South into various nonprofit organizations for a couple of things. One, it serves for these young people as an opportunity for them to develop as leaders, to really understand systemic changes in education policy and practice. And then it also really is a capacity building initiative for these nonprofits. Many of them, they start to come talking to us early to figure out how they can get a CELI student to work with them. And so a couple of examples are these young people have been deployed in advocacy organizations that are doing policy analysis work, grassroots organizations. We had a fellow last year who was placed at a juvenile detention center in Miami, and his role there was to work with the young folks who were in that center to really think about social justice and to think about themselves as community leaders. And so as they were thinking about when they were going to be released, with this experience of sort of reframing who they thought of themselves as, how that would impact their lives. And so when the CELI students come for the orientation and the closing, it never fails that every year there's this real strong interest and emphasis in them wanting to know more and them being smarter about community organizing. It always shows up as a real strong desire for these young folks. And so we thought, well, gosh, if we're going to have this, expert practitioner here with us, it would be great to have the CELI fellows be exposed to the Anew fellow and vice versa. And so our hope is that during the orientation and their closing, the Anew fellow would really be able to help these fellows incorporate social justice perspectives and practices in their work at their assigned placement sites. And then the second leadership initiative that we have here at SCF is called the Racial Equity Leadership Network. And as it says here, it's an 18-month fellowship program that's designed for school district leaders, specifically superintendents who are leading districts, rural and urban districts across the South. We will support through this network 7 to 10 superintendents who will also come together with their design teams, other colleagues. The goal is that they will work on addressing disparities, racial equity disparities in their systems. And so we're hoping that this, again, will be another experience where both of these fellowship programs, the Anew Fellow and the Racial Equity Leadership Network Fellows, would be able to really benefit, have a mutual benefit of experience together, so that we can be thinking about what does community organizing, what does the sort of relationship with the community look like, not isolated, but as a part of the work that school systems do. And so those are the two programs that we really are excited to be able to leverage the expertise of this fellow to support us. Next slide. And then lastly, the microsite. So we, as an organization, have created a digital platform that is supporting a group of advocates and grassroots partners that are focused on education advocacy, education reform across the South. And this network is entitled the Southern Education Network. We are hoping, because it exists, but it's under development, and we're really hoping, again, that the fellow will be able to help us to kind of think through the best way to use this platform. And, you know, for an example, also to think about, well, what's the extension of the work with the Best Practices Institute, and how can the two work together, be integrated together, kind of live with each other to just continue to be able to provide a nice body and portfolio of resources to our partners on the ground. Next slide.
Great. Thank you, Leah. So what is the Best Practices Institute? You see here a picture of a power map that, that we did just a couple of, actually yesterday in Detroit. And, you know, power mapping is very much a tool of community organizing. And so we put it here as a representative of, you know, the sentiment behind the creation of the Best Practices Institute, which is really to ensure that the Institute is providing the resources and information that educators and community really need as they're going about delivering instruction and supporting the delivery of instruction to young people, but that delivery is actually done in a way that is informed by community, that is developed by community, that is really led by community. And so we put this here to say that organizers are leaders, and that we in this fellowship are really wanting to ensure that we are elevating the leadership of organizers, that we are wanting the Best Practices Institute to come from that perspective of community and to really come from the perspective of community organizers. And that, you know, the partnership with the Southern Education Foundation, is, as you have heard, will also provide access to educators and access from educators to organizers, so that they are working in conjunction to really dismantle the barriers to educational opportunity, to life opportunity and success that so many young people of color experience every single day. So that is the feeling and the thought behind the Institute. And next slide. So we'll talk a bit about the application. I want to share, we did just finish 2 days in Detroit, Michigan, where we, the Communities for Just Schools Fund, went to Detroit at the invitation of the Skillman Foundation, and we were able to take several of our grantee partners along with us so that they could actually lead a workshop on education justice organizing, on school discipline reform, advocacy efforts over the years, and some of the successful campaigns that they've launched in different places, so Chicago and DC and Dayton, Ohio, and elsewhere, and share with organizers on the ground in Detroit the ways in which they could be building a coalition around school discipline reform, the school to prison pipeline, and really creation of healthy and equitable learning environments. And I share this because we're really looking forward to the fellow developing similar strands of workshopping that will really cultivate the brilliance that we know organizers have to share, that will really elevate organizers and youth organizers and parent and family organizers and even educator organizers and activists as the leaders, together with superintendent leaders and educator leaders who are the practitioners that are in schools and classrooms with young people every single day, and whose interactions people talk about very theoretically, but who absolutely have to be informing the right path forward. So we see the fellowship as an opportunity to really change people's thinking about young people of color and about educators in the classroom, as a chance to align people's values that sometimes are in silos. So educators operate over here, and young people are over here, and organizers are over there, to really kind of bring those different silos together. And to establish community as leaders with the knowledge and expertise to share with a broader audience. And then finally, to really help communities to be self-sustained and to generate resources to be sustained through using their tremendous expertise and vision, so that the Best Practices Institute is a way for communities to actually not just recommend strategies for the classroom, but also to deliver training, to support educators in implementation of such practices in the classroom, and to begin to develop a bench, so to speak, of players who can really step in and provide the technical assistance and support that educators really need and have been clamoring for. So complete applications must be submitted by 5:00 p.m. on Monday, March 6th, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have before that time. And the next slide will show you exactly the components of the application. So it's a resume and an online application. So the online application gives you a sense of what we're really looking for as we are considering applications. So we ask, for example, for short answer responses to some questions about specific scenarios that we've asked you to respond to for us. We ask for some information about you and about your expertise related to these issues. And so the complete application is both the resume and this completed application. And we want to make sure that you have time and that you give yourself enough time to answer the questions that are in the online application, and also to talk to your references, because we request 3 references from each applicant. And in order for the application to be considered complete, we really want to make sure that the references are also included in the full application. Next slide. So the timeline is that applications are due by 5 p.m. on Monday, March 6th. We will begin video interviews the following Monday, March 13th. And then we'll conduct final interviews in Atlanta at the offices of the Southern Education Foundation on Monday, April 3rd. And we hope to have a final decision by April 7th, so that the fellow can get started this spring. Next slide. So with that, we will open it up for questions. Feel free to type your questions in the chat box. We will also unmute you now so that if you have a question, you can actually just ask it. Any questions? Okay, great. And you have the email address for Alexis Smith, asmith@cjsfund.org. We'll go ahead and mute the lines now. asmith@cjsfund.org or info@cjsfund.org if you do have any questions. And remember to please submit, and we'll go to the last slide here. Remember to please submit your applications by March 6th, 5 p.m. on Monday, March 6th. Thank you all. Have a great day and a great weekend.